The first Invincible storyline that was removed from the show is actually one of the earliest storylines in the comics. On the very first page of the comic, we see Mark carrying a man strapped to a bomb away from a populated area, but his identity is not revealed until a few issues later. The next issue introduces a student from Mark's school who wakes up on a bench near the mall only to realize he has a bomb strapped to him. The bomb explodes, causing massive destruction. Shortly after, the school principal announces that 3 students have gone missing and urges everyone to stay safe. Mark and Eve later noticed that all 3 victims knew each other and had a history of bullying, hinting at a possible connection. Later, while patrolling with Omni-Man, Mark encounters another bomb-strapped student at a mall. Before Mark can react, the bomb detonates, but Omni-Man quickly flies it into the sky to minimize the damage. With this pattern emerging, Mark turns to Robot for help. Robot, already investigating the case, confirms that the victims were all high school students, though he hadn't yet determined they were from Mark's school. He advises Mark and Eve to stay vigilant. The next day, Robot uncovers a crucial lead. Physics teacher David Hiles, a former weapons engineer. When Mark and Eve confront him, David confesses and reveals his motive. His teenage son had taken his own life, which led to his downward spiral, losing his marriage and prestigious job. Blaming bullies for his son's fate, he kidnapped and targeted them. He then reveals he has a bomb strapped to himself and prepares to detonate it. However, Mark uses his super speed to drag him to the South Pole, saving him and Eve. The reason this storyline was cut from the show is unclear, but one possibility is its similarity to the Reaniman plot, which plays a more significant role in the overall story. To avoid redundancy, the showrunners may have chosen to prioritize the Reaniman arc over this one. Another storyline that was removed from the Invincible adaptation takes place in Invincible number 56. While Mark was spending time with Eve and Oliver in his room, he received an unexpected call for help from his ex-girlfriend Amber. Before leaving, he told Oliver to stay home, but Oliver, eager for action, ignored him and set off on his own adventure. Upon arriving at Amber's place, Mark listened as she confided in him about her struggles. She revealed that she had recently lost her father and that her new boyfriend Gary had anger issues. Although she insisted Gary was supportive, she also admitted he often lost his temper. She then showed Mark a massive bruise on her eye, which enraged him. Furious, Mark tracked Gary down and dragged him to a rooftop, making it clear that while he was no longer part of Amber's life, he wouldn't ignore abuse. He warned Gary that if he ever hurt Amber again, he would find him. Meanwhile, Oliver encountered a strange villain who sought a powerful opponent to break its seemingly indestructible armor, freeing it from its own constraints. However, after realizing Oliver wasn't strong enough, the villain dismissed him, which only infuriated Oliver. Mark soon arrived, easily defeating the villain. He then scolded Oliver for disobeying him and sent him home. Later, Mark returned to check on Amber. She thanked him for his help, but to his surprise, hadn't broken up with Gary yet, still believing in him. Amber wouldn't reappear in the comics until Invincible number 117, when Mark visited her one last time before leaving Earth. By then, she had finally left Gary and found a new, healthy relationship. One of the most intriguing Invincible storylines that was removed from the show involved a crossover with Astounding Wolf-Man. After Mark discovered that someone was spying on him and his family, he assumed it was part of Cecil's plans to keep tabs on him, especially after their recent conflict. However, when he confronted a government agent, Cecil denied any involvement. At that moment, another government employee, Agent Hunter, entered the conversation to discuss an unrelated case. Seizing the opportunity, Cecil asked Mark for help, but Mark refused, making it clear that he no longer worked for him and didn't approve of his methods. Cecil then revealed they were tracking a dangerous criminal, a former billionaire accused of murdering his own wife. The suspect in question was none other than the superhero Astounding Wolf-Man, aka Gary Hampton, a character from a parallel Invincible Universe series. Agent Hunter insisted that with Mark's help, they could resolve the situation quickly, trying to pressure him by emphasizing that he couldn't let a murderer roam free. Cecil even offered to help him find out who was spying on Mark, but Mark was still unwilling to cooperate, stating that Robot was already handling it. However, when another villain known as Giant appeared in the area, Mark reluctantly stepped in to assist. Upon arriving at the scene, he saw Wolfman battling Giant. With Mark's help, they quickly defeated the villain. Grateful for the assistance, Wolfman attempted to flee, unaware that Mark had been sent to capture him. Mark attacked, but Wolfman desperately pleaded for just 5 minutes to explain himself, even reverting to his human form in an attempt to gain Mark's trust. He insisted that he was innocent and would never harm his wife, explaining that the real culprit was Zechariah, a villain and his former mentor. Convinced of his sincerity, Mark urged Gary to turn himself in, arguing that if Cecil heard his side of the story, he might even help him. Surprisingly, Gary agreed and accompanied Mark to the Pentagon. However, when they arrived, Cecil was less than sympathetic. While he praised Mark for bringing Wolfman in voluntarily, he immediately dismissed the idea of hearing his story. Mark accused Cecil of being a hypocrite, pointing out that he had previously pardoned murderers, such as Darkwing, and even recruited them, yet he wasn't willing to give Wolfman the same chance? Cecil countered that Gary's case was too public. He was a well-known figure, and the world believed he had murdered his wife. Letting him go wasn't an option. Cecil insisted that it wasn't his job to determine guilt or innocence. That was up to a judge and jury. His job was to simply make the arrest. Realizing that Mark wouldn't back down, Cecil deployed his army of Reanimen to take them both in. The story continued in Astounding Wolf-Man number 11, where Mark and Gary fought against the overwhelming forces of Reanimen. Outnumbered, they fled the scene, but on their way out, they were intercepted once again. This time by the Guardians of the Globe, led by the Immortal. The Immortal warned Mark that defending a murderer was a serious offense. Mark once again pointed out the hypocrisy of the situation, reminding them that Darkwing, who was standing right there, had been pardoned despite his crimes. Darkwing fired back, saying that Mark didn't have a perfect record either. With no compromise in sight, a battle broke out between them. Wolfman continued to insist on his innocence, asking the Guardians to leave him alone, but Mark told him there was no point. They were blindly following Cecil's orders. During the fight, Mark warned the Immortal that he was becoming as strong as Omni-Man, to which the Immortal responded that becoming more like his father wasn't a good thing. Eventually, Mark overpowered the Immortal and hurled him away. Darkwing tried to capture Wolfman by pulling him into the Shadowverse, but Mark intervened just in time to save him. When the Immortal returned and slammed Mark into the ground, Mark made one final plea to the Guardians, urging them to do the right thing. The Immortal refused to listen, saying he couldn't allow Mark to help a fugitive escape. Growing frustrated, Mark grabbed the Immortal and threw him like a projectile, knocking out the entire team. He then launched the Immortal himself far away, buying time for him and Gary to escape. Gary apologized for dragging Mark into this mess, but Mark assured him that he'd be fine. Cecil needed him too much to retaliate. He took Gary back to his home, where they were greeted by Dunford, a friend of Gary's who had been taking care of his daughter in his absence. Dunford explained that Gary's daughter still believed he was guilty. Determined to clear his name, Wolfman set off to find Zechariah, thanking Mark for his help. Mark promised to assist him whenever needed. As they parted ways, Gary reflected that he had gained something unexpected that day, something he thought he'd never have again: a new friend. Interestingly, Astounding Wolf-Man has already made an appearance in the Invincible animated series. In the 7th episode of Season 3, he is seen fighting one of the evil Invincible variants, hinting that he may have a larger role in the show's future. While this particular storyline hasn't been adapted yet, there's still a possibility it could be included in later seasons. However, since it originally took place before the Invincible War and Mark's fight with Conquest, both of which have already been covered, it would likely be altered significantly if it were ever brought to the screen.